1813 Fair Warning with the great Jeff Lewis. We have the great Sonny Mosley with us as well. And Michael, how are you doing? Great to see you.
I'm doing fine.
Man, Michael Cole, one of the greats from the left. The angry left. The left that is giving Amy Coney Barrett a talking down right now. Michael, how do you see these confirmation hearings?
Pretty much like all other confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court, completely pointless. Nothing more than just like dinner theater so a bunch of senators who have higher political ambitions can make themselves look a little bit better to the voters.
Wow.
Other than that, honestly, the confirmation hearings should be, what are your qualifications to be judge? I don't see the point in asking people how they would rule on cases that haven't even been heard. I like the idea that she's staying vague about it because, she could say, oh yeah, I would probably rule this way on this issue, but without knowing the specifics of that issue, you've just asked her to give the responses for a complete unknown. And so what ends up happening is she'll make it to the bench, she'll see a case that she would have said, oh yeah, I would vote for this, and then suddenly there's reasons that she has to vote against it, and everybody's mad at her.
Well,
so,
Jeff, if she...
Like I said, I think
right.
The confirmation hearings should just be, what are your qualifications to be judge?
Well, Jeff, if she continues to say no hints, no previews, then at the end of the day, you have no idea who you're putting on the highest court in the land.
Look, you have a whole mess of philosophy and a whole bunch of court rulings and stuff that she's already ruled on to have an idea of what she's going to do in terms of her political leanings, and we need to take politics out of the court to begin with. This isn't about whether or not she's going to overturn Roe v. Wade or if she's going to.
Well, it's very much about that.
The Second Amendment. This is about, is she a qualified jurist that is going to adhere to the strict confines of the Constitution and not legislate for revenge? That's my only criterion. There's going to be cases where abortion law actually gets upheld. There's going to be cases where it gets struck down unless, of course, we go back to the very principle of, the right to privacy. Does that actually exist in the Constitution? It doesn't. Beyond that, I think she's going to uphold with stare decisis on that issue. So I wouldn't expect radical change as far as that goes on the court. Now, are there reasons to refer this back to the states? Absolutely. But that's a specific issue. We're not approving a judge here for the specific issue of one case. Okay, we're talking about multiple cases over multiple breaths.
Okay.
And I would just challenge the last time they fought back in 2002 when they fought John Roberts. Are the Democrats regretting him being on the court now? I don't think so.
Well, Sonny, if she stays, Sonny, with stare decisis, and she stays with this notion of precedent in law, if she stays with that, you would anticipate that she would not be willing to take a crack at Roe v. Wade. What are your thoughts, Sonny?
There are certain things that are called super precedents, and then there's certain cases that are just precedents. And this is not considered a super precedent. Roe v. Wade isn't, because of the way they kind of twisted the Constitution when the Constitution talking about privacy has absolutely nothing to do with abortion. And there are a lot of judges that agree with that, so it is not considered a super precedent because there's already a lot of judges that feel like it was decided wrongly in the first place.
Michael, I'll let you weigh in on that.
Like Jeff said, keeping it with the states is the way it should have happened. If they would not have ruled that way in Roe v. Wade, then states could have taken up the cases, and dealt with abortion the way they wanted to. And the reason that ABC is not, I love that, by the way, Amy Coney Barrett Coney Barrett, ACB. I'm sorry. I love
It's not ABC anyway.
ACB. The reason that she isn't answering how she would rule in hypothetical situations is actually the Ginsburg rule, and so she is doing exactly what they're the one that they look up to so much. Ginsburg said not to do.
Michael, your views on this notion of the legal precedent and whether Roe, was it wrongly decided, Roe v. Wade?
Let's see, as far as my thoughts on precedent is, if we only appointed jurists because they went with precedents, then Loving v. Virginia would have never happened. Topeka versus Brown Board of Education would have never happened.
Right.
You just stole my point.
Sometimes a court has to break with precedent because of the greater rights or the greater good or the greater constitutionality is being discussed. I wouldn't want some jurist to say, well, I'm going, because the precedents of the 3/5 rule having existed in the Constitution, that precedent having been set, I'm going to rule this particular way. I don't want someone to use because we've always thought that way in order to make a decision. I want someone who's going to say, what is the constitutionality of this? I think we need to get away from the idea of arguing politics with emotion and start arguing politics with logic and empirical evidence. And unfortunately, in modern American politics, we don't do that.
Sonny?
Yes. So, one interesting thing about Roe v. Wade, just a side note, is the woman that was in the case for Roe v. Wade at the end of her life wished she would never have been a part of it, and became pro-life and spoke throughout the United States and elsewhere about her regrets of Roe v. Wade. I believe that it was almost like the locals in the Black Lives Matter movement and Antifa coming in and the Antifa coming in and using all the locals. She felt like she was used.
I would just like to point out that, and I agree 100% with Michael on this, there are stare decisis applies unless there's an egregious error at the court. Okay? And I do believe, and I hated that we had to get this deep into Roe v. Wade, but that was not my intent at all. But if you look at the fundamental rights that are violated in this decision of Roe v. Wade, I don't see how you cannot come out, especially with the modern science we have now, and not rule that Roe v. Wade was an egregious error of the court.
Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it very much.
Go vote, everyone. Go vote. Our oil and gas industry depends on it.
Take care, everybody.
It does.